Week 10 is just about over. Some of your best ball teams are doing well, some of them not so well. So it's time to replace those teams doing not so well with playoff best ball teams. Contests have not dropped yet, but that doesn't mean we can't start covering the strategy for 2025 NFL playoff best ball. Myself, Eric Beinfor, and my good friend Bernie Kurt get you covered on a little intro, a primer, some things we're thinking about for playoff best ball drafts when the early tournaments launch on Underdog, on DraftKings, and on Drafters. We're going to get into some of the playoff odds that we have here at Spike Week, some of our strategy thoughts, some soft skills, some roster construction skills, everything in between that you need to know for your playoff best ball drafts. Apologies for the terrible audio, a little technical difficulty. I'm now traveling, trying to record this without a microphone, but hang in there. We got about an hour and 15 minutes of playoff best ball fun for you here at Spike Week. Let's do it.
All right, Bernie, I can't believe that it's here, and I guess technically it isn't because we're getting the playoff best ball kicked off a little bit early, but we're in the home stretch, right? We're into the second half of the NFL season, which means we should be seeing playoff best ball tournaments, whether it be on Underdog or Drafters or DraftKings, popping up here pretty soon. So we wanted to get out ahead of some early strategy thoughts, a look at the kind of playoff landscape. Maybe we'll look at some teams and some combos. I know you have some thoughts on some site-specific strategy, but just start to get out ahead and start to flesh out some thoughts because playoff best ball tournaments are going to be here before we know it. I mentioned to you, like, I'm going out of town next week. They might drop while I'm gone, so hopefully we can start to get the sort of strategy rolling here, and hopefully it sticks. The conversation, even though people may listen and some games have changed a little bit of some of the odds or what have you by the time you listen to this. I think hopefully it'll still be pretty relevant to your drafts once those tournaments launch.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're recording this on November 7th. And last year, the first contests were a week from today. So we're looking at somewhere in a week. I could see Underdog maybe being 2 weeks out, possibly, just because the fourth quarter contest is launched and it's still pretty early in that one. So it all depends. But DraftKings been moving up and up and up. And Drafters was released pretty early last year too. So we could see early contests in the next 5 to 14 days on all three sites possibly.
Which is awesome. And I kind of like the early contests. Obviously, a lot of what we'll talk about today is overall, and we'll look at some of the later contests as well. But I like some of the early contests because there's this fine line between getting out ahead of something that is maybe advantageous, right? Teams that are maybe not a lock to make the playoffs now that are very cheap, getting out ahead of them, or fading some teams that could potentially fall, right? But also find the fine line of how far do you want, how much risk do you really want to take, right? Yeah. Versus how safe do you really want to play it, because we're still only right in week 10 and we're halfway through the season. A lot of things can change, even though I do feel this year it's the weirdest year, but also not a ton of variance, in my opinion, like in those last several playoff spots, maybe not as much as in previous years, but there's a ton of variance in I don't know who's good. I don't know who the best teams are. I definitely don't know who's going to get the buys, right? It's pretty wide open. Even if the last couple teams fighting for playoff spots is a little bit smaller in number than usual.
Yeah, there's this chunk of teams where you're oh, they're good. They're going to be in the playoffs, but you could put them in any order 1 through 5. And I'd just be okay, that's what happens over the next 2 months. Yep, sure.
Beats 100%. Me. So let's look at that.
Yeah.
I'll pull that up as you go. I'll pull that up, and we can start to use that as like a jumping off point. I'll look at the standings as well as we have playoff odds specific. We'll look at them in a second. But if you're a Spike Week subscriber, we have our own playoff odds. You can look at a whole bunch of different things, matchup, right? Probabilities, bye week, bye team probabilities, et cetera, for all the different seeds. So we'll look at some of that, but we'll also, of course, just look at the general standings.
Yeah. And so what's really interesting about playoff best ball in totality is you really get to decide your strategy. And you can do a completely different strategy for these early contests than when the mains launch. Or you can do the same strategy. It's really like, how do you want to have fun with best ball? How do you want to play it? I have some, maybe we'll dive into it. I have some thoughts on how I'm going to attack the early contests. But let's see what's going on in the playoffs here, the standings.
I love it. So mention some teams that are like pretty much locks to make it, right? Oddly enough, the New England Patriots that you see at the top of your screen, if you're watching on YouTube, one of those most likely locks at 7-2, actually, a half game out ahead of the Buffalo Bills, but the Bills also in really good shape where things do get a little bit hairy, if you will. You mentioned the date that we're recording this, so the Broncos won another absolute disaster football game. I didn't watch that one, actually. I went to
bed at the end of the first quarter, and I'm so happy I did.
I pulled it up. So I mentioned this a bunch of times, but we go to a lot of SLU basketball games. So there was a SLU basketball game last night, and so we went to that. And like I pulled it up a couple times on my phone, right, just to see, like, oh, let's see, check in on the football game. And I was like, nope, not missing anything. I'm literally watching Chicago State versus St. Louis college basketball, and I was not interested in watching that. But the Broncos do keep winning, right? They are 8-2. The Colts are 7-2 and look like a pretty strong team, even if I'm still waiting for the other shoe to drop on Daniel Jones. But then things start to get a little bit interesting, right? With Steelers, Ravens, technically, I guess the Bengals and Browns are in that hunt as well. Though when we look at our odds in a second, you'll see that the Steelers and Ravens stand out far ahead of them. But then you also have a team like the Jags and technically the Texans, right? Chargers and Chiefs in pretty good shape. But just from an AFC perspective, what was something that, kind of caught your eye?
So the biggest thing that's catching my eye is the Baltimore Ravens. And I don't think that we'll be separate on this opinion by any means. And what I'm hoping is we are, as Spike Week, separate than the market, at least in these early contests, where a lot of the initial ADP is usually set and a lot of drafters just look at the wins column. And 7 wins, 8 wins. But recently you need 9 to get into the playoffs to have a shot. 10, you're almost certainly in. So like these teams like the Broncos, New England, Indy, when we pull up the odds, like they're almost locked. Baltimore has work to do, but there's some things going in Baltimore's advantage here. One, they're getting healthier. But 2, they've only played 1 division game. And the division games is the first tiebreaker when teams have shared record, like Pittsburgh and Baltimore for winning the AFC North. So now, granted, Pittsburgh's only played 2 division games. We can see the Bengals there have won both of their division games. So it's not like it's, oh man, the Ravens are going to crush automatically. But they have Lamar. Their team's getting healthier. Their schedule's pretty nice. Mm-hmm. So this is a team where, let's say I get a start and I go Philly. Okay, how am I going to fill my other conference? The Ravens might be a really nice play because they only have 3 wins. Not a lot of people are going to be interested in taking that risk on when there's actually a lot going for their advantage with the rest of their schedule.
I'm always fascinated to see what the market does with teams like this, because I think, they are, I believe, back to being the favorite to win the division in like the betting markets. And as you mentioned, you'll see the odds that we have them to make the playoffs, and anyone, everyone loves Lamar, Derrick Henry, right, Zay Flowers, etc. So like I said, I'm always interested to see what people will do, but I think generally speaking, drafters are a bit more cautious just with teams that are not guaranteed to get in. I will say that I would imagine these Ravens are going to be drafted in the, you're not going to just be able to backstat, right? It's not going to be like, oh, your last 3 picks are Lamar, Henry, and Zay Flowers or something like that, right? That's reserved more for like the Jaguars or something like that, which.
And I think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, that wasn't me touting the Jaguars. I'm just saying, I'm going to be fascinated. That's one of the first things, right? When I open up my first draft is like, what's everybody doing with maybe not the first one, right? Once ADP settles a little bit, what are people doing with a team like the Ravens, who might actually be the favorite to win their division, even though they're 2 games out?
But that's, I think, the interesting key point is what I was starting to interrupt you on of what you finished with is when ADP opens up, like on Underdog, delayed by a day, 2 days before we get the full average. Well, if they just rank it by wins, you might be able to, in these early contests, you might be able to build some killer Raven teams. But that means you're going to have to sacrifice. I'm not taking Josh Allen on this one. I'm not taking Tyler Warren here potentially, or any of those guys. Like, hey, I'm just going NFC hard, and I know I'm playing the Ravens, and if somebody else plays the Ravens, I might get screwed and have to really get dirty to get some Super Bowl combos.
Totally. What about, like, I think in the early, right, when these things open up, I think the Ravens are the one like fringy team that I'm most interested in, right? That's what a lot of people say. Like, okay, what team is like undervalued? And it's like, well, we'll see what the market does with the Ravens, but they're the team that's like, in terms of taking that risk and right, towing that fine line we were talking about before, the Ravens are the one that I'd be happy to take that plunge on.
Yes.
Like the Jaguars and teams like that. I just don't. You need to have the upside in order to take that level of risk. And like, even like, no offense to the Steelers, who are in first in that division, like they're not going to win the Super Bowl, man. So like, it's not worth it to me to take that risk. Whereas the Ravens are that team, but there's not every AFC team we're going to draft immediately. Maybe not. Maybe it is for you, is going to be all Ravens, right? What about the rest? What about these other teams? Because it is a chaotic year. If we look at I'll pull up the odds just super quickly. The Bills are actually the highest probability chance to make the playoffs, just a sliver ahead, but New England and Indy are right there as well, right? Then there's a sizable gap down to the Broncos, but of course they are 8-2, and then you actually have the Chiefs, who are, I believe, third in the division right now, but a heavy favorite to make the playoffs. What about some of these other teams in terms of, we'll figure out what to do with the Ravens stuff, but who are you feeling in this moment from the AFC that you're like really wanting to invest in?
It gets really hard, and the rest of the AFC, I mean, obviously the Buffalo looks really good. Probably Josh Allen's probably going to settle in at the 101. So like, you're going to have limited chances at Buffalo. I'm going to take those chances on Buffalo when it's there, just so I do have that in my portfolio, because I don't want to fade a number 1 seed, at least this year. Other than that, I'll let the room decide, I think, is where I'm at least based on how things look today here in early November. Will that morph and change over the next few months? Yeah. If you told me Kansas City, Los Angeles, Indianapolis, any of them fall off the planet, I'd believe you. If you told me, hey, they won the rest of their games, I'd believe you with Indianapolis and Kansas City, maybe, probably not LA with the alt injury. Right. So there's just some things going on here where I'll let the room decide. And hey, if the other person takes a Chief, I'll take a Colt. If they take a Colt, I'll take a Chief. I don't feel that strongly that I need to make a stand. I know I'm right on those teams.
I agree. The one thing that I find interesting, and I can't remember who said this, I apologize, I don't even remember if it was in our Discord or something, but anyway, we could have a situation if things continue to play out as they have played out thus far in the first round, or just basically in the playoffs, where Colts, Patriots, and who am I missing? One other team, anyway, have the home field, and they're all underdogs to the Chiefs and the Ravens and the Bills, right? Because right now we have the Bills as the highest probability, because this is factoring in like future matchups and probability of wins and strength of team and all that kind of stuff. Now the Patriots are a good team, and they do have a soft schedule, so that's why they're up there as well. But I don't think anybody, despite the fact they beat the Bills, I just don't think the betting markets are not going to say, right, wheels up New England -3 at home against the Ravens, right?
Yeah,
it's just like a full, like, it's just not right. Chiefs go to Indianapolis. It's like, I'm sorry, Patrick Mahomes is not going to be an underdog to Daniel Jones, in the playoffs. I don't care where they play. They could go to the moon for all I care. And Patrick Mahomes is not going to be an underdog. So that's the fascinating part of the AFC. I would say the Chiefs, to me, if you just said, gun to your head, who's the best team in the AFC, I think I would say the Chiefs, with Rashee Rice back, with the way the passing game has been playing this year. The defense has taken a small step back, but still solid. I think everyone has flaws, which is fun from a playoff best ball perspective, because like you said, letting the room decide things for you, especially early, is a great way to play it, because like I said, I think the Chiefs are the best team. That they could play road games the entire playoffs, right? And that's very, very dangerous against good football teams. So like I said, I think the Chiefs, like Chiefs Ravens, would be what I would be looking for to start, because I'm not huge on the Bills, and I'm definitely not buying the Patriots, and the Colts are fine, but like the road for those quote favorites, right? Potential top seeds, Indy, New England, is going to be so tough. Like this is so much tougher than previous years, because of just the weird nuance of how the beginning of the season has played out. And even though we're only in week 10, it's going to be very difficult for the Chiefs and the Ravens and those to like steal a home, to steal the 2 seed away, because there's just not that many games left. And the New Englands of the world are still going to win a bunch with their weak schedule.
So here's a question for you that's going to kind of take these odds and transform it into playoff basketball strategy. So we're looking at just talking about AFC right now. If you want to filter the 1 seed real quick. So we got Buffalo at 35%, Indianapolis at 26%, and New England at 21%. Those are the 3 highest in the league. How are you thinking about building out? Hey, are these teams in the early contests? Hey, is this team going to get a bye? Am I putting a second quarterback on the team? Am I riding this quarterback solo? Like, if this contest released tomorrow, how are you thinking about it?
So I always prefer, and then this is, I'm not saying that this is right, and I'm actually interested in talking it through. What I like to do is we're playing these early contests to try to sort of hit the nuts, if you will. Yep. And I think that the nuts in playoff best ball, especially on Underdog and on DraftKings, drafters can be a little bit different, but especially on Underdog and DraftKings, if at all possible, having just one quarterback that you just use his score, right? Just get me through a couple of rounds and then have a big Super Bowl is real. And you don't even have to have like a big one, right? You just have to have a good game in the Super Bowl. That's the way I really like to play it. So I like to say, let's just roll the dice here, right? The Bills don't get the 1 seed. The Colts don't get the 1 seed, and maybe you're a bigger believer in the Colts than I am, or the markets are, or whatever. And I think that's fine. They're a good football team, but you're just like Daniel Jones. They're not going to get the bye, and they're going to make this run to the Super Bowl. But I don't necessarily think that is always right either, because you'll see a lot of top teams do end up having multiple quarterbacks, and I think you could make the case that isn't necessarily the risk that you need to take on. In that, like, there's like the Ravens thing, the ADPs and such are just not going to be efficient enough that you may not need to take on that level of risk. So I ultimately, I think if it's Josh Allen, if it's like, I know Patrick Mahomes isn't part of that, but technically they have a 3% chance to get the bye. I would be with an elite quarterback, a Josh Allen, what have you, more apt to just take that level of risk. But I like I said, that's not something I'm like completely pounding the table for, like I would in maybe some other structural decisions.
Well, and that's the interesting piece about it is a decision. You get to make it. I get to make it. You watching this right now get to make it. Like, I'm going to ride Josh Allen solo, or hey, maybe I put on a Bo Nix. How I'd probably do it, because I'd probably try to do it from the same conference right now, just so I'm guaranteeing, hey, if I have Josh Allen and not Drake May for some reason is super cheap, and I throw a Drake May, well, I'm getting 1 on the buy and 1 not on buy, or 2 not on the buy. Because wouldn't it really be shitty if you get there and you're like, oh, I got coverage, and Josh Allen is on the buy, and then you decided to do Trevor Lawrence and they don't make the playoffs? Like,
or you mentioned doing it from the same conference, the risk, and maybe we can transition to the NFC with this, the risk by doing it right, like, okay, Josh Allen might get the bye, so I'm going to do Jordan Love. Right. I'm going to do Goff or Jordan Love or Darnold, right? And as you mentioned, the NFC, the all the highest probability 1 seeds are actually in the AFC. It's kind of a 3-horse race, not entirely, of course, but it's kind of a 3-horse race. In the NFC, it's like a 6-horse race. Like there's a bunch of horses with 10% to 20% chances to get the 1 seed. So if you did that right, that's the hard part of it, is like, okay, it's easy to say, well, draft 2 quarterbacks, but it's like, which quarterbacks do you draft together? And I think that the it would be counterintuitive. Like it's a little counterintuitive to say, well, wouldn't you want to give yourself as many shots? Like, right. Yeah. If you're from opposite conferences, you would say, well, I could get the Super Bowl matchup. Right. And like, if you do Lamar and somebody from the NFC, sure. But if you do Josh Allen and someone from the NFC, like you said, like a Goff, like a Love, like a Darnold or what have you, like you could be staring down the barrel at, you thought you were doing this to be safer, and all you did was draft 2 zeros in the first round, because they both get the bye because it's so wide open in the NFC.
And you're not just taking the quarterbacks on those teams too.
Right.
You're adding the stacks. So you're only extrapolating the problem. So I'm probably going to avoid that a little bit in the early contest when things are this messy. But if this contest doesn't launch for 10 days from now and we get a whole bunch more games and this starts to solidify a little bit more, I need to be agile with my strategy. The last thing I'll mention before we get to the NFC here is the Bills have a 35% chance at the 1 seed. That's basically 1/3. Mm-hmm. So there's 2/3 of the time they don't get it. So while they're on the top, they're in that nice darker blue in the gradient scale than all of those. And it makes it stand out like, hey, this is a certainty. Actually, 2/3 of the time right now, they don't get it. And that's, I think, a little bit of a mind trick for people when they're thinking through this stuff.
100%. The Colts being 26% versus 35% is objective. I mean, it's a 9% difference, right? From a percentage higher, the Bills are significantly higher, but 1 in 4 times the Colts get it, and 1 in 3 times the Bills get it, right? And so like that's not really that different. And all it takes, as you mentioned, is 1 game, and these things are going to change week to week. So we're talking about these teams, but it's a little bit more conceptual, right? Next week it could be flipped for all we know, right? These things could be flipped next week, or New England could rise up, or New England could plummet down, right? We just don't know. But I agree with the overall general sentiment, and I do think while the AFC is the wonkier conference because it's like the 3. I shouldn't say that about the Bills, but a couple of the teams that even like the betting markets don't think, like, it's a very Titans, right? Remember when the Titans would like get the 1 seed or the 2 seed every year, and it was like, well, yeah, but they're not going to win. You know, it's like everybody was just like, they're the 1 seed, but like the Chiefs are like heavy favorites to make the Super Bowl. Like the Titans were the 1 seed the 1 year, and they were like 4th or 5th in the odds to make the Super Bowl, not to win, to make, because you had Ravens, Bills, and
you
Chiefs.
have to have some level of quarterback play in 2025 to make the Super Bowl.
It's just so different, right? The regular season to because we don't have balanced schedules. We don't have, right? That's like the Patriots thing. It's like they're good, but they're not really. I mean, they beat the Bills, but outside of a win against the 1 win against, which was a great win, but against the Bills, like they haven't really proven anything. I like them. I like the Patriots fine, but you're just, like you said, you're just gonna, and the markets too, not just like us, but people are gonna say, like, come on, if it's Lamar and Allen and Mahomes, like, how are we gonna bet on these other teams against those guys?
New England, cute story. Now you got to beat 2 of those guys. Not even like, you got to beat Lamar. No, go beat Lamar, then go beat Josh Allen. Like,
exactly.
Tough.
It's genuinely possible that one of those teams has to beat all 3. To make the Super Bowl. Like, congratulations, you beat Lamar and Josh Allen. Here's Mahomes in the
good luck.
Like, exactly. So like that parlay feels right. Daniel Jones, even in like they get the 1 seed, right? Daniel Jones in Indianapolis, like 3 straight. He's like, we just saw the Steelers game, right? It's like that's still in there. The great Daniel Jones is showing up more often than the bad one, but it's like that Mahomes just doesn't do that. Like Mahomes is not going to have that game. So anyway, but I mentioned that all to say that it's like a little bit. The Colts are a bit unexpected. The Patriots are a bit unexpected, but it's not shocking the way the AFC is in terms of who's probably making the playoffs.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's flipped, right? The top 3 teams are actually worse than the bottom 3. But in the NFC, you tell me who's good. Like after week 1, we were like, holy shit, dude, the Packers. Like, holy shit, right? And all year it's been like, the Eagles are still the Eagles, right? Oh, the Lions are going to be better. The defense is going to be healthier. Well, the offense is a little bit worse, and the defense hasn't been that much healthier, right? The Niners are still snake bitten, but there you have 6 wins, right? Like, who's going to win the NFC West? I don't fucking know. Like, who's going to win any of these? Like, I truly have no. Are the Carolina Panthers really going to win the NFC South? Like, it's possible. And so it's so wide open. Whereas they're both chaotic, but in wildly different ways.
Yeah. So here's my initial gut reaction, NFC. The 2 teams I'm targeting out of all of these, Eagles and Rams. Now, should you make a case for the Seahawks to be in that grouping? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Like the fact that they're 4-0 on the road, they have a great differential that's popping off in green here. Like, there's a lot of things. I'm still personally processing them being this good, and I just don't know if I'm there yet.
It's very Coltsian,
yeah,
right? Where like we like the team, but a lot of it has to do with the quarterback. A lot of it has to do with, I think we hear. Like I bet the Seahawks to win the NFC West before the season started. Like I was generally bullish, but it was also like cautious optimism.
Yeah.
Where it, so it's still a bit shocking to see them as one of the best teams in football, like analytically.
Yeah, and like we had a week in the Discord where we were building Seahawks mega stacks on drafters because we're like, this could break the right way, and like so, like it's totally there, it's totally possible. But if we feel that way, the other thing we have to consider is the market is going to feel that way. So is this an opportunity that, hey, everyone's a little reluctant still. I'm a little reluctant, but do we just say, you know what, screw it? I can burn some teams. I talked about drafting Ravens. Those could be burned teams too.
Yeah.
Right? It's probably the right time to get on them before the market corrects to it.
I like
so
it.
Those I think are my 3 tier at the top. Even though I don't feel great at the Seahawks, I think I'm going to do it. NFC North, if we talked a week ago, like you mentioned at the start of the season, the Green Bay Packers. Like a week ago, I'd have been like, yeah, let's do the Packers. But now they blew it last weekend to the Panthers and they lost Kraft. And I'm like, I don't know anymore.
Mm-hmm.
The Lions looked like shit against the Vikings. I don't know anymore. Like, the Bucks, have they looked good in a month? No.
I do think that glad you mentioned the toss the Bucks in there. I guess my strongest conviction is that with the Mike Evans injury, with who knows if Chris Godwin's even going to come back, right?
Yeah.
I just can't really see it with the Bucks. Whereas, I could not possibly agree more with your Packers sentiment. I also share some skepticism about the Detroit Lions, but I could see it. Like I could absolutely see it, right? With those teams, it's just the NFC South. No offense, Carolina Panthers. I know you just beat the Packers on the road in Green Bay, but like, come on, like, are we really going to battle with Bryce Young and Rico Dowdle? You know what I mean?
When or if the Panthers get above 80% odds to make the playoffs, I'll start drafting them.
Yes, I like that. We don't have to cover every number on the on the roulette table in the early stuff. It's actually I that's an interesting early versus late strategy conversation. Is I'm not saying you ever want to cover every number, right? But later on, when it does get to be efficient, when like we pretty much know who's making the playoffs outside of maybe the last wild card spot or something. When we know those things later, it can be a little more like, let's mix and match my pairings, right? Let's be like, okay, let's not be so rigid. And I'm all in Ravens or whatever. Cause it won't necessarily make that much sense as we get later in the earlier contests, right? Like you said, they come next week or in the next couple of weeks. To me, it's a lot more of finding the exploitable spots, just putting my cojones on the table on that and saying, look, this tournament is my Ravens thing. This tournament is my Seahawks thing. And like, look, if they, like you said, if they miss the playoffs, whoops, or whatever, they get the bye. Yeah, so be it. Right. But I'm willing to put my chips in a little bit more, right? Like people in the summer will ask about how much would you cap your exposure on an individual player? And I'm like, well, I kind of like to just shove in. I like to shove my chips in right when if I got aces, like let's just put them in. In these early tournaments, that's how I would feel. Whereas the later tournaments, it becomes like, ooh, I want Bills, Seahawks, but then how do I mix those? And then on this team, I want Ravens and Eagles, and on this team, I want Chiefs and Rams, right? And I start doing that. Whereas in this one, I'm still going to have a lot of those teams, but I'm going to take bigger stands on the thing that I think is just like mispriced, and like we'll look back in a month and it was like, wait, you got who at what price, right? Yeah. That's what I want.
And like, we're hoping it works out with some of these bets, right? Especially if we're pushing in on it, we're hoping it works out. Hey, I really think this is the edge. I'll go in on it. None of these things are certainties. No. Not even close. Like last year, similarly, we're talking about the Ravens right now. I pushed in quite a bit on the 49ers when they were like 4-6 or so. And then the injuries started and they just never turned around. McCaffrey came back and he was bad. Those teams really sucked. But hey, I still made the finals in multiple different tournaments, just not that early one, because that early strategy, because we can morph our strategy throughout these contests. That early strategy didn't have a path. Yup. It did not work out for me last year. So be it. You got to live with that.
Yep, exactly. There's more there will be more contests, right? That
there always is more contests,
and my mind continues to be blown with how many contests we continue to get. One thing that I know, we kind of are bouncing around, but as a subject comes up, I like to just talk about it. That last year, I think the collective we here at Spike Week had a lot of success in the playoff best ball stuff. And part of it was not necessarily like this team's going to play this team in the Super Bowl, which is a lot of what people say, like, right? Like, which team do you think is going to make the Super Bowl? And it's like, that's certainly part of it, right? But there's not that many teams. There's only so many combinations of this team plays this team, especially when once we toss, right, the Bucks and Panthers and let's say Chargers and whoever in the dumpster. Like there's really only so many teams. So it's not like that profound to say, right? Oh, I knew the Eagles were going to make the Super Bowl. Like no shit, dude. But like how you get certainty, the big thing that I'm thinking of here that was true last year that I'm fascinated to see how it plays out this year is if you did that and you just said, okay, this is a Bills team, draft all the Bills. Even if the Bills made the Super Bowl, you had no fucking shot to make it to the final of a playoff best ball tournament because the Bills' skill players did not score enough fantasy points to even come close to competing. Yeah. Because all the best players from a fantasy sense came from the worst teams, right? Nico Collins and Lad McConkey and Joe Mixon back then, right? And I know I'm missing some other guys. It ended up being what you really needed was Washington because they went to the conference championship
and
game,
nobody wanted
right?
Washington.
Yeah, but because it was like they're fun. It's a fun story. Jaden Daniels is great, but everybody was like, "Are they really right?" The Lions had the 1 seed. Are they beating the Lions? Are they beating the Eagles? And obviously they didn't beat the Eagles, but like, are they better than the Rams? And it was like, no, they're fun. They were like let's get me through my bye week, right? That's what they were. Which that's another thing to consider, not so much for the early, but for the late. And so I can't wait to see how that sort of plays out because some of the better it's a little bit flipped where the teams that we really want, right? Like the Ravens are awesome, but it's really kind of Lamar and Derrick Henry and like a little bit of Zay, right? Yeah. On drafters and stuff, you need tight ends on DraftKings and drafters, so their guys come into play a little bit more there. But like the Chiefs, like Rashee is great. Other than that, it's not awesome, right? The Bills,
I'll draft some of the other guys, but I don't care. Like,
but you can't be dependent upon even Xavier Worthy. You cannot be dependent upon Xavier Worthy carrying it. He is like a Super Bowl play, right? And so
Super Bowl,
understanding
maybe conference championship play. Like, I need other high scoring players to get me there.
And I think that is still going to be a big edge. I just don't know how it's going to shake out yet, right?
Yeah.
I don't know that, but it's such a big edge of figuring out like this team needs Nico Collins, dude, or you are cooked, right? This team needs Joe Mixon, right? If you got 2 games at running back from Joe Mixon on teams last year, it was like huge. He didn't like go crazy, but just getting a usable score because right, Pacheco and like James Cook wasn't that great, right? And then like Gibbs has a bye and whatever. So you're screwed if you didn't get that score. Figuring that part of it out is so big. It's a little bit, trickier with the buys in the early contest, but it's not so tricky with like, dude, you cannot count on Keon Coleman until the Super Bowl. Like he is you love the Bills, but if you just draft Allen, Cook, Shakir, right, Coleman, whatever, you're like, it's over. You lost because the other teams are going to score so many more points. You got congrats, you got the Bills to the Super Bowl, but you lost in round 1 because your team just doesn't have enough raw scoring upside.
Exactly. The raw scoring upside, I think, is one of the things nobody's thinking about. We talked about it a little bit last year, and I didn't hear anybody else really talking about it in their content. Now, I don't consume a lot because I want to have original thoughts myself, but what is Nico Collins versus Keon Coleman in round 1? Nico's 20? Keon Coleman's gonna be 4 projected points. I don't know.
Let's just look at this week just for fun. We can show you the difference between the two of them. So just PPR for funsies. Now, obviously, this is not accounting. This is Nico playing the Jags with Davis Mills at quarterback, but still, Nico in full PPR projects for, let's call it 16 points. Keon projects for 11, and I
was
generous.
way off, but
the 11 is being generous because he scored 11 twice this season, right? I would project him for it's like, does he score a touchdown or not? Really is Keon's thing, whereas Nico is just gonna get his. Even with Davis Mills, but it's also a projection. Like a 5-point projection gap is up. It doesn't feel like a ton. You're like, oh, it's only 5 points. Like that is a lot, dude. Because like the best players only project for like the low 20s, right? So like if I'm projecting for 5 more points than you, that means I'm a star and you are a role player, which is the exact example that we're discussing here.
So it's this balance too, because every team you draft is going to be textured a little bit differently. And okay, well, do I want to weave Nico in here? And that's where something like the Draft Hacker can really help you. And you can see, hey, these are the combos of players I have together. Hey, I don't have this one with Keon yet. Okay, maybe I weave them in. Oh, I don't have this with Lad yet. Okay, maybe I weave them into that combo. Or because the Draft Hacker doesn't tell you what to do, you get to choose what you do. Maybe you just put your nuts on the table and you go, it's going to be Nico every single time. And I'm going to use Shakir later on, and I'm going to have Dalton Kincaid.
I drafted so much of these guys last year, and so maybe I'm being, results oriented. But I really do think it's one thing that even I 2-3 years ago just like didn't think. Right, it was the whole playoff best ball thing was like, well, this feels easy, right? It's like draft 4 from the Bills and draft 2 from this team at whatever, and you're like, and then just like see how it goes, and then the deeper you get into it, like you said, it's like, I don't know, man. If I don't get Zach Ertz on this team, like I'm screwed, right? It's like it's a real thing, and like I think there's a big skill in figuring out like when, and not this year Zach Ertz, but last year Zach Ertz was awesome. It's like figuring out when, like you said, when I need Nico Collins, or like just obviously not Nico this year also, but like let's say this team needs. Let's say you don't like the Seahawks.
Yeah,
you don't like the Seahawks, but like your running back can get tricky as well, right? And it's like, I don't know, man. Ken Walker's got to be. I don't like the Seahawks. I didn't draft 3 Seahawks on this team or whatever, so I'm not playing for them to the Super Bowl. But like, I have it.
Maybe you have a Chiefs team.
Yeah, exactly. I got Brashard Smith and whatever, some bad running back team. It's like, good luck, dude. You better have Ken Walker on this team. And like that skill of figuring out when to just like, do your 4-3-3 team, right? With 4 from this guy and then, whatever, but figuring out when that lad one off, like maybe Lad's an example. Like when do you just need Lad, right? Maybe you don't like the Rams that much. It's like, buddy, you need Kyron. Like you don't like the Rams, but you better have Kyron Williams, in the 5th round on this team or whatever, and then back right now go get your Chiefs. Yeah, but you need the Rams to like play 2 or 3 games.
And so that right there, I think, is a soft skill for this game as opposed to like a hard structural rule.
Totally.
And I'm writing an article right now, and I'm calling it guilt-free spending. Right? Of like sometimes you just need these one-offs, and a lot of people think about them as the 12th round or the 10th round, depending on what site you're in. It might be a 3rd rounder. Okay, maybe you get 1 on that team. But if it's your 9th and your 10th rounder, maybe you get 2 on that team of this guilt-free spending bucket. Because there's just going to be things that happen. Like you mentioned Zach Ertz last year. Maybe we talk about tight end here next, if we're good with the NFC. Because there was 2 years ago, if you didn't have Jake Ferguson on DraftKings, you were cooked. Just cooked. And like if you weren't, and the people that were taking him were building the teams that were building Cowboys to the Super Bowl. Or like, hey, I got I can't remember who was good that year. I think Eagles and some of the other ones. I'm going all Goddard. Then Jake Ferguson drops 3 touchdowns in the wild card round, and you just lost your whole portfolio because you were 0 exposure to Ferguson because you didn't think Cowboys could make it.
Or the opposite, or not even just the opposite. When, like you said, you either drafted right on your Eagles Chiefs team. I think it was Eagles Chiefs part 1 that year, right? Eagles, congrats, you got Eagles Chiefs. You were right, but you drafted 0 Ferguson on those teams because I'm not taking a one-off Jake Ferguson. Why would I do that?
They play the Eagles too early in the bracket.
Yeah, they're going to play the Eagles in round 2. The most I can get is 2 games out of him. I can't fill a Super Bowl, right? Whatever. Those are logical and reasonable things to say. But like you said, when we need to introduce the soft skill part of it, where then you also say, all right, I don't do Ferguson on those teams. I'll do Ferguson on my Dak, CD, right? Like what a Dowdle or whoever it was that. Like I'll do.
I think it was
on
Zeke.
My Cowboys teams. It was Zeke.
That year.
You're correct. Zeke, was Pollard still around? Yeah. Wow. What a now Pollard is the dust one. It's funny how these things change. But so like, okay, cool. You're like, look, I have 20% Jake Ferguson. It's like, yeah, but it's all Cowboys teams. Yep. So like you lost by the sheer fact of one decision of I don't draft Jake Ferguson on these teams and I only draft Jake Ferguson on Cowboys teams. And then congratulations, he scores 3 touchdowns in a loss, right? In round 1. And your entire playoff best ball year is over from one guy doing one thing because of the way that you constructed rosters. Now, no one is sitting here saying A, that we knew Jake Ferguson was going to do this, or B, you should draft Jake Ferguson one-offs on every single team. But it's just being open to the teams that may need that and finding times when to play a little bit of dodgeball, right? Dip in and out of like, yeah, like this team just needs this one-off, like high upside swing, like even if it's only one game, right? Like last year, Ladd McConkey was fucking huge for teams and they lost because he dropped 40 or whatever on the Texans. And it's like, yeah, how did you get Chiefs Eagles there? It was because you drafted Ladd and that got you out of that first round. And then you were fully equipped in the second round, because the other thing to remember is there's a lot of dead teams in those following rounds, right? Because people draft bad teams or people just, upsets happen, whatever, right? You're gonna run into, so there's just the further you can make it, the better off you're going to be. So figuring out how to kind of play the chips each step of the way that help you, just even if it seems silly, right? It's like, why the hell would I ever draft that guy? It's like there are use cases for those guys a lot more than I think our opponents think.
Yeah. So to wrap that point up, I don't think our teams need to be pretty screenshots every single time. Is it fine if some of your teams look lovely in screenshots? Absolutely. But if it's like, I'm not going to put this on Blue Sky, that's okay. Somebody's going to make fun of me. Guess what? Sometimes those are the teams that win, especially in this, where like the wild card round is a single game decision. A lot of different things can happen in a single game to move you on. And I think the wild card round is really interesting because the two best teams or highest scoring teams potentially, I mean, okay, maybe not highest scoring, but the two best teams in each conference aren't even playing. So it just adds this extra level of wonkiness to the scoring. So the other thing I had about tight ends is I prefer the sites that include tight ends.
Me too.
I think it's going to be a really interesting this year because most of the good teams don't have a tight end you're dying to draft. Like Kelsey's over the hill, and he might be the first tight end off the board. It's going to be really interesting how to play tight end this year.
I'm trying to think. Kelsey also always gets overdrafted in these.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I think he might be the first tight end off the board.
Yeah, everybody loves the Chiefs as they should. And like you said, especially on the right. So for anyone that doesn't know, Drafters and DraftKings, as a mandatory tight end on Underdog, tight ends are mixed in with the wide receivers. And so it's just an added element of strategy that I think is really fun on the
drafters or the DraftKings drafters aren't notoriously known for going deep into their strategy. So I think it gives us an advantage.
100%. Talk about dead teams being drafted on draft. Welcome to DraftKings.com. There's a lot of dead teams that get drafted, but the tight end thing is really fascinating. So let's just run down some of these playoff teams. Patriots, Hunter Henry, Bills, Kincaid is quite good. Kincaid is quite good.
He's doing better than I thought he would.
Specifically he's said this like a million times over the course of the year, so I apologize to the people for but it's important is that Dalton Kincaid is very game script driven. Like when they play the Saints and they win 41-7, Dalton Kincaid plays like, I'm not even fucking kidding, like 15 snaps. He's just like, that's like his second bye week, right? When they beat somebody that bad, when they play someone that pushes them, he plays a lot of snaps, and when he's on the field and when he's running routes, he's the go-to guy in their passing game. So it's a very weird role because he's not a good blocker, but so they use him as like the primary pass game weapon, but they don't really want to pass. So it's but when he's out there, right? We've seen he just put up a 100-yard game. He's very good when they're pushed to do it, and so theoretically in the playoffs we'll get more of that, which makes Kincaid pretty solid. Yeah,
like if I took Josh Allen 101, I'm prioritizing Kincaid on that team.
100%.
Over even if ADP doesn't quite align to that, I'm going to take him over Shakir and Coleman. I can figure out crappy wide receivers later.
Get ready to learn Josh Palmer, baby. Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't even really care to talk about it, but I guess pick your Darnell Washington versus Johnny Smith versus Pat Freiermuth. Good luck. I'm very sick of the Darnell Washington goal line package that continues to be a thing for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I don't think I'm going to get there.
No, but as we talked about, like potential like one-off opportunities, it's interesting to bring some of these teams up just to see. Like, no, thank you for me on that one. But Zach Ertz was one of, if not my highest owned player in playoff best ball last year. Again, because I play a lot more on the sites with tight ends and just with the way I took a lot of Eagles. So, and a lot of Chiefs. So you get a lot of Laporta and you get a lot of Kelsey, and and I did draft Lions, Eagles, Chiefs were like three of my biggest stands, and so it was like, well, two of them have buys, and the other one is like not that great at tight end. So you get a lot of Ertz. The Ravens, the Ravens are also just like whatever, like on a Lamar team. Both those guys are fine, but again, not amazing. Colts, Tyler Warren. Okay.
Yeah.
That's solid. Denver Broncos. Do they have a tight end? Evan Ingram is on the team, I guess.
I mean, I swear to goodness. Okay, now I'm drawing the blank. Who's the 41-year-old guy who got mentioned way more last night?
Oh my gosh. Yes, I know what you're talking about. But
they're bringing him in for snaps and within a week of signing him.
It's over for Evan Ingram. The Chargers have an interesting one, but again, the Chargers fit into that Steelers bucket for me, where I think they'll have some it's possible that a DK Metcalf or a Jalen Warren or something like that has some usefulness. Same thing for Ladd. We'll see what's up with Hampton. Should theoretically be back at some point at running back, and then they do Aronde Gadsden is a good tight end, right? So they might have some usefulness in that regard. But like you said, no Rashawn Slater, Joe Alt, another high ankle sprain. We don't know when he'll be back. I mean, the Chargers could fall out of the playoffs, and they also could just I'm not sure they have the upside given their injuries to make a run, but some one-off potential.
Gadsden's the right type of one-off guy, not for the early contests, but for the late contests. Hey, it's week 18 plus, so we're in between the regular season and the playoffs, and you draft a double bye team, so the bye team in both conferences, and you need a player with high upside and a tight end site. Gadsden's a good one. He's like that Zach Ertz from last year.
Totally agree. Obviously, the Zach Ertz thing worked out,
but
much better than expected because they made a run. But
we just need a lot more information than we have today to know if we're willing to make that bet.
100%. And then obviously the Chiefs, we talked about some of them. Just a super quick scan from specifically the tight end thing. Eagles, Goddard, fine. Packers, Musgrave, I guess, but it would have been Kraft. Laporta is obviously solid. The Bucks we've already kind of talked about, and Kate Otten is whatever. The Panthers, no, thank you.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he's due for one of his late season. Wait, Kate Otten scored 30. What just happened? Right, that he does once a year or whatever. Seahawks don't really use a tight end. Rams don't really use a tight end. Obviously, the Niners have Kittle.
I think the problem with the Rams is they use 3.
Yeah, right. They use them. They
just spread out.
Yeah. So all that is to say, on 2 of the 3 sites that we will talk about for playoff best ball, that is very difficult to navigate the tight end position, right? And like we talked, Tyler Warren's one of the best. Tyler Warren and Aronde Gadsden were 2 of the guys, or were 2 of the 4 dudes who we were like, oh, yeah, okay, that's nice. And neither of them are on teams that we're excited to bet on, right? So again, that goes back to that soft skill of, maybe you have a little bit more Tyler Warren than you actually think, even though maybe he's a 4th round. I'm just making shit up.
Yeah.
Maybe he's a 4th round pick, which feels like you're taking one-off 4th rounders. It's like, well, look at what do you want me to do? Am I supposed to count on Isaiah Likely for 4 weeks?
Well, that's just it. Let's say you go Buffalo Rams is your Super Bowl and you don't get Kincaid.
Yeah.
How are you going to get to the Super Bowl at the tight end position? I might need to pull the trigger on that 4th, 5th round Tyler Warren and then tag on Knox or Higbee or whatever is relevant at that time of the year for my conference championship and my Super Bowl. Kittle's going to be an interesting one. I personally think San Francisco is very iffy. I know this looks pretty good for them. I'm not dying to go all in on San Francisco. I could see somebody making that bet, but if you wanted to, they're not going to get the bye. You got George Kittle. That might be a solo tight end team.
Yeah, if you believe in which we have no reason really to not believe they continue to do it. I will say they are my least favorite team in the NFC West of the 3. I really, really like the Seahawks, and I really, really like the Rams. They're probably 2 of course, the Eagles are great, but I do think the Eagles this year, now said this last year, probably a very similar time you and I were talking, and I was shitting on the Eagles, and then they not only went to the Super Bowl but won it. So that's good job, Eric. But what I will say, this is not the same Eagles team as last year. They turned it on in the playoffs, right? All we asked for all of last season was throw it more than 15 times, stop playing to just get a quick lead with a run game and then take the complete foot off the gas, right? And bury some teams, because you're there's no reason last year that the Eagles should have been a Xavier Legette drop away from Bryce Young coming back and beating them right in the 4th quarter. But they were, because they played so non-aggressive. They've been forced to be a little bit more aggressive this year, at least in recent weeks, right, lit up the Minnesota Vikings. AJ Brown and Devontae Smith having some big games. Of course, Dallas Goedert catches like 2 touchdowns every week, apparently. But the ground game isn't as good. The defense isn't as good this year. So that's reflected, right, in the record, but in a lot of this stuff too. So I think the NFC is a little bit more wide open. And I think those 2, and if you like the Niners, 3 NFC West teams are super interesting because they're pretty unlikely to get the bye, all of them collectively, right? Seattle is at 16%. The Rams are at 13%, and San Fran is at 8%. So possible, though not likely, that they get the bye. And I think by the end of the season, any one of them could be like the best team in the NFC. But we're gonna for sure get 4 games out of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Any last things on some odd stuff, and then we can take a look at kind of some teams from last year, so people can kind of get a glimpse of some stuff that worked last year. Obviously, we can't just copy paste and every year's a new one. Blah 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 blah. But anything else here?
So the only thing I'll mention on the odds is this concept we've been teetering around is these are going to change. Like there's a subset of teams that, like, if we look there, Pittsburgh and down, I'm just not going to draft any players from right now. 53%, that's not good enough for me for a team that I don't believe can win the Super Bowl.
Right. This isn't the Ravens at 53%. This is the Steelers. Yeah.
Yep. So when I'm going to these teams that have lower odds, it's, hey, I think they can make a Super Bowl. I'm not throwing a one-off. Like, let's say I have Philadelphia versus Kansas City for my Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to throw a one-off or Jalen Warren on that team right now at 53% chance. I might throw a Zach Charbonnet or a David Montgomery if I need that running back help. So I think that's going to be something where people are like, oh, well, I don't want, the 6th or 7th best player on a team where somebody else already has all their good players.
Mm-hmm.
I might take that and just kind of steer away from this uncertainty. An interesting way to think about this is like last year, this is a similar spot where the Cardinals were at. And I was putting on one-off Trey McBrides and the tight end sites, and then some Marvin Harrison, some James Conner. They were about 53, 58% at this time of year. They just cratered off the edge of the cliff. Well, how do you avoid those? And you're basically mitigating your risk of, okay, James Conner versus Zach Charbonnet, if they're both in the playoffs, or I guess that's not a good example because Conner's out this year. But Jalen Warren versus Charbonnet.
Yeah.
Warren is probably projected. But how do you factor in odds weighted against projection in the early contest with 8 weeks to go in the regular season? Yeah. I'm probably going to go to the Charbonnet in my early rounds, not the Warrens.
That's a great example of where comparing, right? We did the Nico Collins versus Keon. Yep. And like, again, I know Nico, it's not apples to apples, but like from last year, Keon would go even just a little bit ahead of Nico Collins, if I recall, right? Because it's the Bills, right? And
yeah,
you'll Bills find if you never played playoff best ball, you're gonna it is very mind-blowing the first couple times you draw, where you're like, Keon Coleman goes 19th overall and this guy goes 30. You're like, what? So it is a little bit of a mind fuck, but yeah, it's also understandable. But the gap between a Nico Collins and a Keon Coleman is so vast, like we talked about. Whereas, look, Jalen Warren out projects Zach Charbonnet. Of course, absolutely. No one is denying that. But the odds of Seattle making for sure making the playoffs, right? We have them in the 80s, 89% versus Pittsburgh at 53. That is a huge gap. Where, okay, that feels very cozy that Seattle's going to make it, or something catastrophic has to happen for Seattle not to make it. Whereas Pittsburgh's kind of fighting an uphill battle. Warren outprojects Sharps, but not the cliff is not so right. It's more like a little hop down, right? You can step down that cliff. You ain't tumbling all the way down to your death. It's it's like he outprojects him by 1.5 points or something like that, right? So you're like, am I really going to give up this like locked in running back on a Seahawks team that also could make a run? That's the other thing. It's not just the odds to make the playoffs, right? These are seeding odds, the odds to like, and these are Super Bowl.
Yeah. Okay. So while you're pulling it up, the Super Bowl matchup ones, I love the playoff odds, but then this Super Bowl matchup odds is like my jam. Those are the two things I look at. I know there's a few other options there. These are the two I look at the most.
Right. You can see each step of the way how often, from a probability standpoint, teams will play each other. But again, so Seattle, right, has a 12% chance to make the Super Bowl. That's substantial, right? Yeah. Versus a 4% chance for the Pittsburgh Steelers, which, I know we can't like bully the math. The math is the math. And I'm not the expert that puts all the math together. But 4% also feels high for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Well, but right. So it's like, am I going to give this up? Do I really want to give this up for 1 point higher percentage chance and like a way higher percentage chance that Warren just is a 0 because they don't make it, and a way lower percentage chance that like, I don't know, man, the Seahawks could make the Super Bowl, right? And you're just like, the Steelers are just never going to make the Super Bowl. Like, we're making fun of the Colts and Patriots who are gonna have the best records in the AFC and how they don't have a chance. So no, the Steelers do not have a chance as the 7 seed or whatever.
Yeah. So I think that's just an interesting thing for us all to think about when we're going into these drafts of like, the bets are already hard. Why make them harder on yourself?
There's ways to make bets that are, like you said, that are already hard. We don't have to like turn a 5-leg parlay into an 8-legger.
Yep.
Right. Because the payoff is the same.
Mm-hmm. Right? And I'm going to take risk elsewhere.
Yes. Right. That's the soft skill stuff that we've been talking about. Like when do we do this like one-off thing? When is this too much risk? Right? When is this not enough? When is like all of that is like, it's very feel based. Like I can't sit here and tell you like, there's no rules, right? If this, then that. But it's like in the only way you can really do it is by drafting a lot, right? And you draft a lot, and like by your 15th, 20th, 50th, 100th draft, you're like, yeah, I know exactly when. Now you can be wrong, but I know exactly when to do the Jake Ferguson thing. I know exactly when to do, like, sometimes it might happen and you're like, fuck, I got to draft Steelers. Right. You're like, it's not impossible. Right. But it's like, when do you do that? When do you do Sharps? Right. When do I need that 4th round Tyler Warren? When do I need Kyron? When do I have to build for a Patriots Super Bowl, even though I don't like it? Right. Like when do I do all of that stuff? It's like, it's entirely feel based, but it's also like why this game can be so advantageous, because if you can figure out, like, just be directionally accurate, you're never going to be, if you can figure out these like little skills that we're talking through here in your draft, like specific to your draft, not just like we all understand them. That's it. Like that's the huge killer thing.
Yeah. And it's going to change throughout the offseason, early versus late. Are you playing on Underdog, which is 2 out of 6 or 3 out of 6 advance out of the wild card round? Or are you playing on DraftKings? That's 1 out of 6. Are you playing on Drafters where it's cumulative? Like, there's a lot of different things that we're going to have to put into play. Oh, okay. There's these risky things that we might pull these levers. Well, what other things do I need to think about? Because the wild card round is sometimes easier than some of the later rounds.
Yeah, that's it. You'll probably hear us say when we come back in a few weeks or something and continue to talk about this and draft some teams. You'll probably like hear us say like, I need this guy in the conference finals, right? Or I need this guy in the second round, or like this, right? Like we've talked about, like this guy, Nico, just get me to round 2 because now I got my reinforcements, right? Like I got sort of lucky, but I shoved my chips in, I guess I shouldn't say sort of, on the double buy stuff last year because of everything that we're talking about. And I was like, dude, I'm going to draft as many Chiefs, Lions, Super Bowls as I possibly can. Now, like I said, got a little bit you can't functionally do it on every single team because it just, they're snake drafts. But I had so much of that, which actually got me a little bit lucky, getting a lot of Chiefs teams into the finals. Some of them did end up having Eagles on there as well. But like, right? That's when you draft a bunch of Nico, draft a bunch of Ladd, draft a bunch of Mixon, draft a bunch of Ertz, McLaurin, Jaden Daniels, right? Those guys are fixtures of those teams. And then because sometimes it just shakes out your right, the Washington thing. Like, I didn't predict that. I thought that I shoved my chips in on the Lions. Of course I didn't think that they were going to lose to Washington, but sometimes it goes that way.
Yeah, and so we both made the DraftKings final, and my DraftKings final team was this Jaden Daniels thing where I drafted Daniels to play round 1, Lions and Chiefs to make the Super Bowl, and just happened that Daniels actually carried it with the Chiefs to the Super Bowl. I was dead in the Super Bowl. I didn't have a chance, but like if that Lions Commanders game goes a little bit different, I just got a double bye team to the Super Bowl.
Exactly. Which in like just from that, you like your expected value of something like that, right? It's like like you said, these are all these skills, but like planning a team, it's when the first contest opens, the early stuff is right is a little bit trickier because we don't know buys but getting an unlikely Super Bowl matchup there, it doesn't always have to be double bye, right? Someone might say, maybe that is Ravens. Right, like we kind of led with at the very beginning. Maybe that is Ravens, where it's like, like they may not even make the playoffs, so people aren't necessarily drafting them against whoever, them and the Lions, right, to make the Super Bowl. An unlikely Super Bowl matchup is the easiest path to like. So like if you're just like, I'm going to draft all of the Bills, Eagles. It's like, well, fucking congrats, dude. So is everyone. Like, and if it gets there, if that's the Super Bowl matchup, like everybody has that matchup down, right? Whereas, like the why we like the double bye thing, we'll see about this year because we might be.
It really depends on what happens in the AFC.
If it's a Colts bye, yeah, it's a little bit different. But that's again like knowing when to do like the one-off stuff. When is this a very unique combination already? All that that's the fun that you just kind of learn through drafting, and we have a lot of the tools here on Spike Week as well. But yeah, last year was such a great example of like, dude, if the Lions thing went differently, but even like I think I had 3 teams through. One only had like two Chiefs on it or something like that left. One could field a full team except tight end maybe, and then one fielded a full team. It just wasn't the nuts by any stretch of the imagination. And so it's like, I don't know, man. If you can tell me I'm going to get 3 teams to the final, and like I think we looked back and it was like 30% of the not even like maybe 20% of the field could even field a full team in the DK. I'm like, shit, dude, that's a shot at 500K and like nobody has a good team. Like, sign me up. Yeah.
And I think DraftKings is probably where I'll play my most teams at this year, especially in their big contest because of these points. Exactly. It's 1 out of 6 last year, and I'll zoom in on that a little bit more, but I'll talk about what this is too. It was 1 out of 6 last year. They almost always run the same formats back. So it's going to be 1 out of 6 on DraftKings again this year. So what this is this is our playoff odds tool. And you can I'm pulling up last year's 20 for 24 DraftKings main, but it's right here in playoff combos. Excuse me. So what it does is it lays out all the teams that you drafted players from. And we can see that 40 teams of mine were Kansas City versus Detroit.
Amazing.
In the main event for DraftKings. I drafted 59 teams. So you mentioned putting your nuts on the table, Eric. I did it with Kansas City and Detroit last year because here's my theory. Is this double bye thing we're talking about? It's way harder to advance this on DraftKings. You have to identify those right one-off pieces. You have to be willing to grab the one-offs in earlier rounds. I don't think the DraftKings drafter is that good to do that. They might be able to fill a full roster with a double bye, but that's pushing it. Right? So everyone wants to avoid risk. This is the type of risk that I mentioned earlier that I'm willing to take risk. I want the best team from the AFC. I want the best team from the NFC team. They have good players on them. That's the Super Bowl I'm going to build for on DraftKings. I plan to do the same thing again this year, unless it's one of these AFC teams we just don't want.
The interesting thing about, like you said, even if someone drafts double buy on DraftKings, especially, so first of all, as you mentioned, DraftKings is 1 of 6 advance, right? These are all 6-person drafts. One of 6 advance on DraftKings versus 2 of 6. A very sizable difference, of course, on DraftKings. And then you add in the tight end thing as well, which makes it even trickier, right? Even if our opponents can feel, which very often you will find people just go in cruise control and like they can't even draft, like they literally just donate $20 or whatever because they don't field a full team in the first round. But even if they do, as you mentioned, it'll be like, okay, get my 6 guys from the Super Bowl, right? Double buy. And now all my last picks, right? Backfill at the end. And it's like, well, what actually you can do is blend in, right? Actually, your 4th round pick is not from one of the bye week teams. It's like, that's right. That's Tyler Warren. That's whoever. And then you're like, my 4th and my 7th and my 9th. And then actually my 11th round pick is part of my Super Bowl, right? Is my, Juju, right? Juju Smith-Schuster or whatever, something, someone like that. Khalif Raymond, right? Like, you get one of those guys on the team. I know this is last year, not this year, but like that kind of stuff. Whereas everybody, like the amount of, I'm trying to think of what would be the equivalent to this year, the amount of like DK Metcalf and Emeka Ibuka and like those guys that will be on these teams. Like, let's say the Jags do get in. It's like, then they'll take Travis Etienne, and it's like, it's all their last picks. They all suck. And they're definitely all going to lose in the first round. It's like you can have your cake and eat it too. That's where the Washington thing was so powerful. By the end, Jaden Daniels actually got quite pricey, but he was still totally worth it because obviously they won a couple games, but he was so helpful in getting your bye week guys through. And then remember, because then like you show up to the next round and like most of your opponents don't have in the second round, don't have the bye week guys because it's just naturally harder to advance them. And then you're supercharged. It's like, okay, I lost Nico, but I just gained, this year I just gained Jonathan Taylor and AJ Brown, right? And it's like no one has them, and no one has them in your pod.
And these double bye teams also, not even when you're drafting these players to get the bye week coverage, but how you draft them, I think is a mistake people make. The other mistake I see, besides not filling out the lineup correctly, is you'll see somebody overstack. Like, hey, I got this double bye Kansas City, Detroit last year Super Bowl. Let's say you're building for. But hey, now I come in and I draft 4 Rams and 2 Broncos. Because I can only draft a maximum of 4 teams or else I can't post it on Twitter. Right? Well, sometimes to get those 6 bye week coverage players, they should come from 4 or 5 different teams. I'm very willing. I want to get a QB stack in there, preferably with tight end or wide receiver out of my double bye teams for the wild card round. I definitely want to stack, but I don't need to go to deep 3-person stacks because at that point, you're basically saying they steamroll 48 to whatever. I'm going to be a little bit more like, hey, I'm going to get a Lad, I'm going to get a Nico, and I'm going to get Jaden Daniels, and I'm going to get Zach Ertz. And you could theoretically get all those guys last year. And I did it, and that's how I got to the finals. Granted, I didn't have the finals matchup, but still, like, there's ways to do this that don't look beautiful. They're still very viable.
100%. And I think it's a great kind of probably spot to leave it is if I had like people want, especially in playoff best ball, like even more so than regular best ball, to have rules. That's it, right? Like a short, give me a shortcut that just says how many of each position do I draft, right? How many guys do I need in the Super Bowl? How many, right? You'll constantly hear people ask, should I do 4-2-2-2, right? 4-3-3, 4-4-2, right? It's like people ask that, and then they'll ask like how many of each position. And the answer, as always, right, and everything in best ball is, of course, it depends. But specifically, what you just said is those are pretty, right? 4-2-2. You're like, I got 3.
I see your plan.
Yeah, like, so what are you building for, right? People, what are you building for, right? And it's like that's still true in really any, because you need to have some kind of Super Bowl matchup. But the prettiest teams are not always the ones that, and generally not the ones at all. But because the pretty teams are not the ones that did the Jake Ferguson one-off. The prettiest teams are not the ones that had Ladd McConkey one-off last year, right? Or Zach Ertz or Jaden Daniels or whatever. They didn't do that, but they were actually the most effective teams. And so long as your team is like, this cheesy shit that we've said for 10 years now, and then you're just telling some story of like, I have a Super Bowl matchup and a Super Bowl matchup that you can win with, right?
Yeah.
That's the other thing, is like, if you show up with Noah Gray and Juju and Kareem Hunt, and Khalif Raymond and Brock Wright or whatever, like, okay, you have a Super
You
Bowl
made
matchup.
it.
You can't actually,
$25.
you're gonna score 14 fantasy points in the Super Bowl. But like this middle ground of a realistic Super Bowl that can actually win if you make it to the final, and then whatever the fuck you have to do the rest of the way is the answer, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how many of these positions, 2 quarterbacks versus 1. I don't know, right? Like 4 Lions, 6 Lions, 3 Lions. I don't know, but the answer, whatever you got to do to get it there, and it means something different on every single team, and I think we addressed a lot of those different decisions that you have to make along the way. But yeah, that's it. Like, that's it. I think that's the story.
Yeah, and it really just comes down to getting your Super Bowl players. Okay, getting your bye week coverage if you need it. Okay, are there any additional Super Bowl players or matchups you want to build into that team? And then that guilt-free spending. Like, hey, I'm going to take a one-off here. It's okay. Will it work out? Probably not. But if it does, and I hit, and this is the team I get through, wonderful. There's so much chaos that happens in the NFL playoffs. Sometimes we need to draft with some chaos.
That is so true. The NFL season is chaotic. The NFL playoffs are chaotic. Not in just, and people often think about the last thing. Sorry.
Yeah.
Often think about chaos in the terms of there was an upset, right? And like last year, we did get that, right? Washington over Detroit. And sometimes that is one form of the chaos. But the other chaos, right, is the Jake Ferguson thing, is the Ladd McConkey thing, is the whatever, is like wait, that guy scored 30? And like, congrats, your Khalil Shakir 12 points. They did not beat Ladd McConkey. Like, no, you did not beat the Ladd McConkey 40, right? In round 1. It's like there's chaos in all of this. Like, big games come from losing teams all the time. I don't want to pod variance and all that kind of stuff, right? Like like praying into the luck is a part of this game. I don't want to be solely reliant upon that. I want to pull levers myself, not just pray to the fantasy gods that like, things work out my way because I built a pretty team. I think we can do actionable things that maybe don't look the prettiest, but functionally serve the purpose that isn't just, well, let's pray to God Keon Coleman catches a touchdown, right, in round 1. It's like, again, we can have our cake and eat it too. It just may not always be the pretty. This isn't a Netflix cake show. This is an Eric and Bernie cake show. And, neither of us are bakers or cake designers. So,
and okay, the last thing I'll say is don't feel bad grabbing someone out of somebody else's Super Bowl matchup.
Yeah.
Right. So we all talk about like, playoff best ball is the greatest way to stay in your lane. I'll be in my lane. You'll be in your lane. We won't take each other's players. You know what? Guess what? You see me in your lobby, I'm going to take your players potentially. You can do it to me too. Like, it's going to be fine. We're all adults here. I think that's the most overblown thing about this is I need to be in my lane for my Super Bowl matchup. But if I want another one of those players to help me get through from your matchup, I'm taking them. Sorry, buddy. You got to figure out your team. I got to draft the best team I can.
Such a great one. We're playing for keeps. We're playing for money. We're like, this is fun. It's a fun hobby. We all enjoy it. We all enjoy talking about it. I'm playing to win $100,000 or $500,000. Or like, I'm playing a game. Like, you and I can talk about the strategy. We're in a draft together. I'm trying to beat you, right? You can finish second. Cool. Congrats. I will be very happy for you. I'll celebrate your wins, but I'm not going to celebrate your wins more than my own. I'm sorry. That's just what it is, right? We're playing a game for money. And so, like you said, like the whole like staying in your lane thing, like, does it suck sometimes, right? When somebody doesn't stay in their lane and it spoils your plans? Sure, but guess what? Yeah, everybody gets it's a snake draft. We can all choose whoever we want to choose, and if they have a plan that differs from your plan, that's fine. That's what the peer-to-peer game is for.
Yep, it's beautiful because when they're staying in their lane and they're on, I got 3 Eagles. I'm going to push Devonta Smith another round. Click draft.
And you can sometimes get, because the other guys, right? That's it.
And then they're going to keep staying in their lane, and you just build your better team.
Exactly. There's just so many ways. Because again, at the end of the day, we're playing against other people. We're not playing to make something pretty. We're not playing to keep everyone happy and make best friends. We're playing to win. And so that may require somebody gets annoyed at you, or you do something different than what, right? The consensus, all the people in playoff best ball land are all saying this isn't what you should do, and you go swim upstream. Great, that's great, because we're trying to play this game to win, and that is going to require some decisions that maybe other people don't love, right? If everybody loves it, you probably built a shit team that ain't going to win. That's just how this thing works. What a great way to leave it, telling people that they're building shit teams. But we hopefully this helped. This was a lot of fun for me. Now they need to drop some damn contests, because now I'm excited.
I'm ready
to go draft. We will be back soon after they launched. All the sites start launching some contests. We will of course have rank. I'm actually going to try to get rankings done before, maybe even today, before they get tournaments out there, just so people can have them from day one ready to rock and roll. Bernie's got some strategy pieces coming out, as do I. Some early playoff best ball thoughts, and we will be doing live shows, also recorded stuff and everything as soon as the contest drops. So be on the lookout for that. Of course, all the fun stuff, like, subscribe, everything, and you can get access to the tools, including stuff that you didn't see today, everything you saw today from playoff odds and draft IQ that Bernie pulled up, but the draft hacker, which can really help with a lot of the decisions that we were talking about making here today. And all that comes with the Spike Week subscription, which of course there's a link in the description, $39.99 a month or $200 a year. I think that's it, Bernie. I'm tired now, but I'm excited to draft some playoff best ball. And let's go. What did we decide? Ravens and I guess some NFC West. Ravens and some NFC West. I want to track our thoughts along the way. To see, in a couple weeks when we talk again, and we'll be like, "You idiots, the Ravens! Like, what were you doing?" So we'll see in a couple weeks how that goes. But everybody have a good one, and we'll catch you guys next time. Peace.